Hello, and welcome to the Coffee with Demons podcast, where everyone is welcome and no one is judged. On this podcast, we'll explore the minds and the demons of individuals with different backgrounds, mindsets, and missions. My hope is that you walk away stronger than ever after listening to the stories of inspiration, empathy, and intellect that the Coffee with Demons podcast has to offer. Everyone battles demons, but no one has to do it alone. Now enjoy the content and savor the coffee. So my guest for today on this episode of the Coffee with Demons podcast is a longtime friend of mine and someone who I've always admired, Kaitlynn Harvey. It was eye-opening to hear her story and the demons that she kept inside for so long, along with the demons that she openly faces today. I know the topic of addiction and family combined are not so easily discussed, so I just want to thank Kaitlynn for coming on and sharing her story, as I know it wasn't easy, but I truly believe that it will be helpful to others. Enjoy. All right, well, I'm going to kind of kick this one off and just give a little bit of background on what I know of Kaitlynn, what I've known of Kaitlynn, and then I'll let her say her piece. So, growing up, we were always really good friends. We had a good relationship, and I thought, like this episode will be about, or the topic mainly is just everything is not as it seems. So, from my point of view, kind of like we talked about with Jordan Wardekemper in the last episode, I thought he had it all, and I thought you did as well. You were a smart girl. You were super athletic, one of the best athletes in our class, actually. And, I just really didn't know any different. So, to me, Kaitlynn was, student council president, right?
Yep.
Class president. A leader in every way, a great leader in every way, which is kind of makes me think and we'll get into it. I'll explain myself a little bit more later, but, there are some situations that affect people in a negative way, and I can't wait to hear your opinion and just see if this situation kind of pushed you to be better. But my sophomore year of college after I read in the paper, or on Facebook actually, I think it was, that Kaitlynn's dad had gotten into a little bit of trouble. And I've known Kaitlynn's father, and I thought he was a great guy, and I still think he's a great guy, definitely. And but he did get into a little bit of trouble, and it kind of came as a shock to the whole community, I think. Mm-hmm. But it was dealing with something that she had known about for a long time. So I guess my first question to you is, when did you realize that your dad had an issue, and then if you kind of want to explain what that issue was?
Mm-hmm. So basically growing up, I would say I had a normal childhood, or what it appeared to be, and my parents were very supportive, gave my brother, my sister, and I pretty much everything we ever wanted. And then in third grade, my parents told us that my dad was leaving to go away for a business trip for work. He was gone for a month, and then when he returned home after that month, everything seemed a lot better between him and my parents, between him and my mom. And just, before that time, they would have arguments here and there, and, we really didn't know what was going on. So, but when he did get home, I was in his room probably 2 weeks later, and there was a book on his desk, and it said Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I picked it up and I started reading inside of it, and there were notes that people left him, telling him to stay strong, and how he's so lucky to have such a great support system with his kids and his wife. And that's when it kind of clicked for me that my dad must have been an alcoholic or an addict. So I would have been around 8 or 9 at that time.
So being so young, sorry to cut you off,
yeah.
Being so young, do you think that you knew fully what was going on, or was this addiction or alcoholic kind of just more of a word than an actual, than being able to realize, or somebody who might embody that?
So I think, being young, I didn't really understand what it was, but knowing how often my parents did argue and how kind of overprotective my mom was with my dad, I kind of had an idea that was obviously something bad, and it was, at that point, I thought it was a choice he was making over his family. So after that happened, I just kind of started getting standoffish with my dad and like trying to figure out who he really was, because I didn't know if, you know, the person I loved and looked up to and like always made me laugh and joke around with was like really the person who I thought he was. And, you know, like after that happened, it made sense why my mom put so much pressure on me to, you know, help Jacob and Kylie out, clean the house up and like do this and that, just so she didn't have to worry about those things, so she could focus more on like what my dad was doing and things like that. So after I like realized all this, I basically just kept it to myself, because I didn't want my dad to know, and I didn't want him to think I thought any differently of him or anything like that. And I didn't want my mom to know either. Just because they were keeping it a secret already, I figured like I might as well just not say anything, because who knows if it's true or not, you know?
Well, okay, well then I'll just take off. Actually, that was a great place to stop. So my question now is, you kind of explained why you didn't keep the secret. You didn't really want them to know, kind of play things off as normal, as you know, an 8 or 9 year old would do. Was there ever a point in time past, you know, those being 8 or 9, so say, you know, 11, 12 and up, where your thoughts kind of started to change and you were like, maybe I should talk to them about what's going on? Or was there any certain occurrence that happened and you were like, oh, I need to speak up? Because to me, from what I get from your story is, you know, it wasn't like your dad, it wasn't a horror story, I guess. Mm-mm. So there was never any like brutal contact or anything that was kind of like, oh, this isn't good, but he was actively trying to fix himself when you know, found out. So as you were growing up, you know, did anything ever click, or did it get to a point where you thought you needed to tell your parents? And if so, what was that?
Mm-hmm. I think the way that I spoke up was honestly through school and sports, just because like I knew that's how I could get my dad's full attention, and that was also a way for me to escape, you know, like what I knew. So I just like worked as hard as I could and everything just to make him proud, and like he always practiced with me every day, and like with school and everything he would help me with that. And you know, there were times like they would argue and I would just want to go out where they were and just tell them that I knew, but I didn't, just because I also wanted to protect my brother and sister, just because I didn't want them to also, you know, change the way they looked at my dad or my mom or anything like that too.
So bottling up what you were feeling, and I can't really speak to what you were feeling, and it might even be hard for you kind of to recall, and just knowing more now. And do you think you ever suffered from, you know, demons that were because of that might have been like more anxiety or depression, and that you were just kind of like, it's a sadness, I know what's going on, this is why, and I'm just gonna push past it and not tell anybody?
So during my sophomore year of college is when I really realized that I have like serious anxiety, and also depression. But that was when things started to kind of turn around for my family, which we'll get into. But like just growing up, I knew I was a very anxious kid, but I just thought that's like who I was and how I am, and like being a control freak like I was sometimes. Like I think just always trying to be perfect and always doing better, and like wanting people to see me as someone who was strong and like, you know, could take on the world. I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I think that's where a lot of my anxiety came from. And
so just from what I know of my psychological background, or I mean my schooling anyways, with psychology, you had mentioned to me previously about this psychodynamics of a family, and from the psychodynamic, you know, theory or perspective, a lot of people take, so we'll give the example of like an alcoholic dad comes home, beats kid goes to school and bullies. So basically how these conscious but more unconscious, how you portray yourself is because of something you might not, you know, give note to. So I think that even though you were having these issues, however you channeled them, or however you were able to push past that and be, tell yourself that you need to be better. And you were so successful in, everything you did. Can you just kind of attest to that? Was there anything in your head was there ever a time that you wanted to, I guess, go an opposite route of what you did? I mean, because like I said, you were the leader.
Yeah.
You were smart, intelligent.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, because I just wanted to make a better life for myself. I didn't want to go through that kind of thing, and I wanted to have like a happy marriage with someone, and I was really dependent on myself to get myself where I am. And my parents taught me that too. My mom told me to never depend on anyone else. Like, I need to get through school, get a career, things like that. So I was really just focused on that and dependent on myself. And I didn't want to have that life, and I didn't want to give my future children that life. And so there was never a turning point for me where I wanted to like give in to my inner demons or think that what was going on was okay.
Do you think that you subliminally or unconsciously may have had, some bad attributes that you pushed off to other people's or even to yourself or family members without, that necessarily being something as significant as like being a actual bully? I mean, do you think that looking back on it now, you were like, oh, maybe that's why I was the way I was?
Yeah, so I would say I definitely did bully people, probably just because, I don't know, I did have like a controlling issue, which I did get from both sides of my parents. And, in sports, I was very aggressive. Like when someone would steal the ball from me or like swat me, I would chase them down and like foul them as hard as I could. So just like kind of those behaviors, and like sometimes maybe being over possessive towards like my friends or like my boyfriend or something at the time, which I think attributed to like my parent relationship. And with my brother and sister, just being a control freak and like acting like I was their mom when I clearly wasn't, but just like taking on that role of, just like making them do the things that we needed to get done to make my mom happy.
Right. So speaking about your siblings, do you think that they ever showed any signs of, I mean, not recognition towards like what was going on, but do you think it affected them negatively from like even not knowing? Or what could you tell, and would you try to, correct that?
I think, like, now I can definitely tell how it has affected them. Like, they're not very open to talking to anyone about it. They bottle up their feelings. And, like, they just act like everything is okay. And, I mean, they need to talk about it, and that's something that I've learned, and that's what's helped me cope with everything. So, yeah, I see how it has affected them negatively.
Yeah, it's just crazy to think that, I guess I wasn't in a super similar situation, but just being in high school and dealing with what I didn't know at the time, what I just thought was sadness or that could have been, mental health or considered mental health issues. It's crazy that times are changing, for the better, and we're making more awareness of, these problems that people can get fixed. But to me, just like yourself, I was like, this is normal. Maybe I'm just sad, and I should push through it. I shouldn't be like the way I am.
Yeah. And like in high school, we thought like those people were just desperate for attention.
Right.
And that's what like upsets me, is like it's a legitimate problem. So
definitely a legitimate problem that doesn't get near enough recognition. So I do want to thank you just right away for coming on the podcast and being open with your story, because I think helping, even if it helps one person, it's wonderful. So exactly. Thank you for being here. Next thing I kind of want to ask is, when we were chatting earlier, you talked about how there was a moment when everything flipped. So was it an actual like flip of a switch? You could tell when things either declined or got better, or was it more gradual towards either direction?
I would say it was more gradual, but like when it did flip, it completely flipped. So freshman year of college, once I was away from the home and on my own, my mom decided to file for separation divorce, and took my dad basically by shock. He wasn't expecting it at all. And throughout my freshman year, basically I was just dealing with my mom, my dad calling me all the time, like expressing their feelings, just because I was that person for them. And like I was disappointed that it was happening, but at the same time I thought it was best for them because, you know, I just didn't think they had the greatest relationship growing up. And so after that happened, sophomore year of college came along, and I could tell my dad was just like standoffish towards everyone, and you know, didn't really talk to anyone, and just wasn't himself at all, and he was just angry all the time. And then after the summer before junior year is when he got into trouble, and that's like when basically everything switched and everything came out to everyone. And Jacob and Kylie like finally realized that he did have addiction problems, and I finally like came out and told them I knew since 3rd grade. And after my dad got into trouble, about a month later, he went to Tennessee to a recovery center for his 2nd time since I've been born. And we actually went and visited him for a family fundamentals weekend when we learned about like the psychodynamics of a dysfunctional family that deals with an addict. And I've never learned so much about myself in that weekend, just literally by like a psychologist talking in front of everyone, and just like learning about how addiction is a disease and it's not necessarily a choice at all, and just like learning about the hardships my dad had growing up and kind of his inner demons and why addiction came into play since he was 16 years old.
Right.
So he's been suffering forever with it. And then like after that weekend and he came home, everything seemed better, and him and my mom actually even seemed better. And then unfortunately this January things turned around again, and got into a little bit more trouble, and he's currently in California receiving dual treatment diagnosis. So he finally found out there's like mental health issues actually going along with addiction. It's not just an addiction problem. And he's been there since May, and I think he'll be there till about September. And I've talked to him about every week, and like he seems like the good old Eddie that we all know. Like he just seems a lot better, and he seems like himself again, and that he finally found peace in his soul again, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So we'll see where it goes, though.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. So backtracking a little bit to when everything kind of flipped, mm-hmm. you spoke to me about quitting basketball. Yeah. And to me, I always knew you loved basketball, and mm-hmm. it was something that you and your dad definitely shared. Yeah. So was quitting basketball a, conscious decision that like I'm going to get away from the sport that, maybe ties me to my father in any way?
So, basketball had always like been my thing, as you know, growing up. But sophomore year of college, it was to the point where I would cry every day, like call my mom, call Alex, and just like bawl because I absolutely hated it. I didn't want to go to practice.
Oh, so it was basketball that you didn't like, so it wasn't
hated it. But like I didn't want to quit because that is what was like the center of my dad and I's relationship. Okay. And I didn't want to disappoint him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
So like I kept with it, and then I finally talked to my dad about it and just told him how unhappy I was, and he says he gave me his blessing to like retire basically. So I finished out the season, and then I did decide to quit after it, and it was like the hardest decision for me, but it was also the best decision I've ever made. And I'm glad like I didn't disappoint my dad in any way, and that he was completely fine with me, making a decision for myself and being happy finally, and just like being aware of my mental health and like emotionally, just because it was seriously like destroying me doing something I absolutely hated. So
yeah, well, I think that's great that you were able to recognize that. And so far we've talked about how this, we definitely spoke on how my image or everyone else's image of you was, skewed to as it is in most situations. So these demons that just are hidden to everybody else and just grinding away at people, and that's got to be, it can't just be you, it can't just be Jordan Watercamper, it can't just be me, it's got to be more people that aren't talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
So what did you think, and I don't know if you would use sports, if you used, like the leadership in any way as your kind of medium that you didn't even know about, like to push past that mental illness? Because for me, now that I'm aware of the issues that I might have or that I did have, and then that I'm actively seeking out, solutions to them as, Coffee with Demons, and just trying to promote, those different mediums. And I know yours was, or could have been sport. So I guess getting back to an actual question, did you any outlets that you were like, oh, this is what I'm doing to help myself?
I would say, like, growing up through high school and everything, I didn't really have a medium. I mean, I guess I could say sports, but that was I didn't know I had anxiety or anything. So, like, after sophomore year, after I quit basketball, I finally got to, like, start doing things that I enjoyed. I started working with kids who had disabilities, and I don't know, like, I just started to try to find things that I enjoyed, and not because, like, it was something I had to do, things like that. And I guess I went out of my comfort zone and met so many new people, being, like, an RA at Hastings, and just connecting with other people I never would have connected with before. I don't know, I guess just, like, communicating, and I don't know. I didn't really have a medium, I guess. I still haven't really figured it out.
So how do you think, looking back as a whole, how do you think that your dad's addiction affected you, your family, your siblings, your relationships in high school, and that relationships even just to, your friends? Did you tell it? So no one knew? We'll start there.
Like, growing up when we were little.
Right.
There were, like, a couple of my close friends that did know, but, like, no one knew the whole picture till probably freshman, sophomore year of college. And that's when, like, some of my other close friends even, like, came out about their stories, and, like, it's just crazy how much we all truly had in common. And, like, if we would have told each other this when we were growing up, like, we so could have helped each other with all of it. And that's something I wish we would have done.
I agree.
Yeah. And basically, I guess my freshman year of college, I was really lucky to get an awesome roommate who, never really was dealt with any of this type of stuff, but just her support, and, like, whenever I was down, she constantly would just bring me up by just, like, making me laugh or go do something with her. So she was a huge help dealing with everything, I guess. That's when everything really started to flip around, too.
So was there a turn from, I know there was a turn from good to bad, or to the public's eye, I guess.
Yeah.
But was there ever a turn, in the opposite direction from bad to good, where you were like, or you finally noticed that, hey, things are improving? Or was it just gaining more knowledge about the situation, mental illness as a whole, addiction as a whole?
So I think when we were in Tennessee, I thought it was going to go from bad to good. Like, I really had so much hope that things were going to turn around. But, addiction is a disease, and it's a continuous cycle that, like, the addict, the person that's being affected, has to fight for the rest of their life. And unfortunately, it happened again for my dad. And, it's hard because, like, I have forgiven him, but it's just hard to, like, trust him again, because I don't want to see him turn into a completely different person like I have probably 3 times now. So it's just, I don't know, it's difficult, and, like, I have so much hope that he can fight it for the rest of his life. And I know he needs a support system, and I know that, people will look at him differently because of what has been put in the news or in the public, whatever. But, like, the real people who know my dad, like, for who he truly is, know he's a great guy. And that's the thing with addiction, is it takes people, turns them into a complete stranger. Like, they're feeding their inner demons, and it's like it's basically like watching someone die, because you don't know who that person is anymore. Right. And that's the hardest part. And so I guess I don't know. That's how I feel.
Well, talking about, just alcoholism or addiction in general, from my schooling, what I basically could summarize as, you said it pretty good, or very good actually, just how it changes them, and the person who's going through that addiction actually literally, may not know. I shouldn't say in every case, but they may not know that, they're causing those issues, or they're acting some type of way due to those, chemicals in the brain giving off too much dopamine, not, too much technical stuff, I guess, but they really, disconnect from the person they were, and might build up a new personality around the drugs and addiction, which is, I think just something as simple as you coming on and attesting to that addiction is more than just a choice. It's not just a choice. It's a disease, and we need to help people instead of looking at them in a negative way.
Exactly.
And I'd put that even up there with, I know depression and anxiety lead or are considered mental health issues, but I would go as far as to say, addiction is, well, it's definitely a mental health issue as well, but we need to destigmatize that and get help to those people instead of just writing them off as done for.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I think the sad thing too is, yes, they have to come to terms that they do have an addictive problem, and they're the ones that can help themselves. Like, the people who love and care for them can tell them, but only they can finally realize it. But once they do, get help and recover, but I feel like people still view them as an addict or an alcoholic, and still they still feel worthless because that's how people view them. And I think that's what ends up happening for people to relapse, just because they don't think they have the support to continue their recovery.
So do you think, when we were talking earlier, you said, or just, earlier in the podcast, you said that you didn't want to tell your dad because you didn't want him to think that, or thought that you would think of him differently.
Yeah.
But then you also said kind of that you were acting different towards him. Do you think that, do you think your relationship with him suffered because of, things that weren't said?
Yeah, I do. Just because I really thought our relationship was based around sports, and I just kind of put up a front with him growing up after I found out, just because I didn't know if the person who I thought I knew was the real him, which it really was him, but I didn't know, just because my parents had lied to us about it. So what else were they lying to us about? You know what I mean?
Definitely.
So yes, I do think it did hurt our relationship, but now, since my mom's been honest, my dad's been honest, we've all been honest with each other, and that weekend in Tennessee we had was absolutely life-changing for me and for my dad, just because we did get a lot closer and he opened up about everything. So I guess if they would have been honest and open the whole time instead of trying to hide it, I think it would have helped things not get as far as to where they are now.
So speaking back to just how it literally affected you in your life, do you think that for you and your siblings, do you think that your dad's addiction issue, I don't know, I see you as just you still have everything going for you. And do you think that seeing your parents try to cover things up and try to work it out for you and your siblings so you didn't suffer, do you think that, unconsciously pushed you to say hey, they're trying, so I'm going to try even more, or try harder, do the best I can?
With school and sports wise?
Right.
I wouldn't say so. I think I don't know. I guess I was, so with the roles we were talking about, the roles. So the addict, codependent, family hero, the caretaker, trouble child, and then basically the invisible child. I took on the roles as the family hero and the caretaker. So basically, family hero is the person who's leader of all the clubs in high school, the athlete, straight A student. Basically, their role is to make the family appear normal, nothing's going on. And then as the caretaker, you're helping the codependent, who would have been my mom, basically help around the house, help the codependent, like, cope with what was going on. So, like, my mom and I have a relationship where mother-daughter, yeah, but, like, we're also best friends. So she basically tells me all of her feelings, which, like, I really don't need to know probably everything. You know what I mean? So I think once I left for college, she didn't have me there every day like she was used to, and I think that scared her. And, you know, Jacob and Kylie weren't necessarily that close to her in that type of way, I guess.
Right.
So I think me leaving the house did have an impact in a negative way, which sucks. And, you know, it makes me, like, feel like it's my fault a lot of the times. But there was nothing I could have done.
I hope you enjoy what you're listening to, but don't forget that Coffee with Demons is more than just a podcast. Head on over to www.coffeewithdemons.com to check out news on our meetings, new blogs, and even new podcasts. This episode of the Coffee with Demons podcast is sponsored by Guethlein Psychological Services. John S. Guethlein is a licensed independent mental health therapist with a master's in counseling psychology and a doctorate in clinical psychology. Dr. Guethlein has been providing mental health services in the community of North Platte for 25 years. He has an extensive experience working with adults and adolescents coping with ADHD, anger management, and behavioral issues. John also provides therapy for a wide range of issues that can be addressed in the individual or family session. So thank you, Dad. Thank you for always supporting me and being the first sponsor of the Coffee with Demons podcast. So we've talked about, you know, the issues coming up, how everything, you know, was different than what people actually thought it was. And now I want to get into the more helping, self-actualization, trying to improve others' lives as well as yours. Mm-hmm. So what have you actively been doing to improve your mental state? What have you actively been doing to, you know, recognize that these are actual mental health problems and trying to make those better?
So like I talked about sophomore year when I kind of really realized that I do have anxiety. I actually went and saw our school counselor and talked to her about like my family issues, how I worry constantly about the future and how I have really hard trouble sleeping at night.
So that right there just screams to me like, you know, anxiety.
Yeah.
But, and I've known that, or I have not known that, but just, you know, it's something that I got taught as a psychology major. So did you know those by name when you were feeling depressed or anxious? Did you know that you were like, oh, I have anxiety right now? Or you went into your counselor and you told her and she then not diagnosed but said, hey, this is, you know, what you might be dealing with?
Yeah. Like, so I basically told her what I was going through. And she said that I have, like, several signs of severe anxiety. And, you know, I just thought I was a person that worried all the time, which is obviously kind of what anxious people do. And then, obviously, at the same time, I was depressed because of what was going on with my family and basketball. And she told me that anxiety and depression are, like, best friends. If you have one, then you more than likely have the other. So after talking to her, I came home to North Platte and visited my doctor and told her basically the same thing, and she got me on medication for anxiety. And so I'm still taking that today, and I'll probably continue to take it throughout dental school, just because I do, like with school and everything that gets built up with school, I do get very anxious at night. I get very anxious. And then to help with like my sleeping, just because it takes me several hours sometimes to fall asleep, I just take Benadryl. Like, I already have allergies, so I just take Benadryl, which helps me sleep. Were you going to say something?
Oh, well, I was just going to ask, do you think there's, well, I guess, so you're dealing with that in a way, a more traditional way, like someone who has the anxiety, depression, the diagnosis. So for Coffee with Demons, I guess the only thing that I was going to say is, you know, I'm not trying to go after the people, or I guess I'm not trying to go after the people that would be considered, I don't know, I've used the term like severely depressed or, you know, but like the schizophrenic people or the people who have major issues that need to see either, you know, be in a hospital, a supervised state, but more those people that don't know, like you were talking about, that are feeling like, hey, I'm anxious but don't know about anxiety, or I'm feeling blue, I'm just sad, and don't know about depression. So where I guess you would just be a perfect, like, not example, but not case study, but someone that, could use the services that, I'm trying to provide. So I guess my next question for you is, do you think that you're going to try to seek out not more help, but, just help from other directions?
Yeah. So basically just talking to people, like talking to you, talking to my roommates and all my friends, like, has tremendously helped me, just because that's what I would bottle up all the years. So anytime I'm like anxious or worried or like having mental breakdown, basically, I will talk to someone about it, whether that's like one of my best friends, my mom, anyone. But like if I were to get into like a state of depression with anxiety, like I was sophomore year, then I probably would like seek to just go talk to a counselor or something like that. Just because I do think their insights are helpful.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's, perfect. Just for me to speak a little bit about, like I was saying, I'm not trying to, Coffee with Demons isn't for the people that need a medical professional, whether that be, a PsyD or a PhD, a psychiatrist, someone who, knows exactly what they're talking about and can read that. And not, even though I think that it might be hard for some people to go in and talk about, if things aren't improving by finding an outlet, talking to other people, that's the direction they need to go. But there are steps, and you've taken those steps, and I think that's perfect to tell the world that you've taken those steps, and they do work. And like knowledge is power, so what about these demons, and now kind of what to do about them, and if it gets worse, what to do about them. So I do think that's awesome.
I think one more thing that's like really helped me is just like opening up to everyone and realizing how much more in common I like truly do have with other people deep down. Like it's just crazy, because if more people just open up about like what they're suffering with and like their stories and hardships, like if you just talk to people, it helps so much. So
can you attest to the more knowledge is power thing? So more now than you did, or was there, or I guess that kind of sounded like a question, but from my perspective, you just, growing up, we just didn't know. We simply didn't know that these were severe issues that could be fixed, and how we didn't know how to fix them either.
Yeah.
So do you think that learning more about mental health issues and ways that you can fix them it's helped you?
Yeah, definitely. Right? Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I do want to talk about inspiration that you want to give to others, or the empathetic side that I'm sure you've always had an empathetic side, but kind of how that's grown and what you want to do with that, or how you want to help others because of your past.
So basically just being the caretaker of the family, like I've always had that empathetic side. And, just like coming out with my story, and like people aren't always how they seem. And I just hope this helps like more people just embrace their past and their hardships, because like those are what help you become the person you are. Like I wouldn't be a strong, like independent person if it weren't for what happened growing up and what has happened in the past 4 years. And like for me, luckily, I overcame those hardships and have strived to become like a better person, basically. And I just hope that people who are dealt like hard hands, that they choose to create a better life for them, and not just to settle where they're at and think that that's basically what has to happen for them also.
So what do you think that was for you? So when you noticed, hey, I don't like, this isn't fair, I wasn't dealt the best hand, how did you, or what inside of you was like, I'm gonna do better, I'm gonna be better?
So like one thing about my dad is he always wanted like basically a better life for his kids than he was dealt, because he had a pretty hard childhood. So he was like a huge motivator for me. He always pushed me, told me, climb the mountains. If you fall down, keep climbing. So like my dad is a huge inspiration to me, honestly, even though, what's happened in the past. But, he keeps getting up and keep climbing no matter how many times he's fallen down. And I've also was really lucky to have great mentors in my life. One reason why I'm becoming a dentist is because, my dentist I see as my second dad, and he treats me as if I was his own daughter. And he was a huge inspiration in my life, and, just made me feel capable and that I was smart enough basically to do whatever I wanted to do. Along with like my coaches, I just feel like I had a great support system growing up, along with like my friends, even though all these people didn't know what was going on behind the scenes, but they just treated me, I guess, like I was normal and capable, and I think that's what really helped me. And I guess I just wanted to make everyone proud.
Very good. Being vulnerable, you're being vulnerable right now, just coming on the podcast, sharing your story. Do you think that comes with age? Because I guess I'll kind of give my 2 cents on it. What I see is everyone kind of struggles at the same time in life. And then once we hit, our 18, 19, 20, we learn more, we grow up, and things start becoming more apparent than maybe they have been. And like I have just pounded in kind of, just knowing more makes life easier, even though I do think ignorance is bliss in some cases. I just think that it sucks, but age is one of the only things that might help somebody, out of a dark place. So, and it's sad to, suicide would be terrible in any facet to any family. And so I just want to, I don't really know. I just want to say to those kids who might be struggling and not know quite yet, or not understand what's going on, that, it gets better even with time, even if nothing changes as you grow older. Maybe it's just the time in our lives, and I hope that's the case. I know we deal with struggles that, a lot of generations haven't before, but, there's the sun's going to shine tomorrow.
Yeah, I think age and just maturity have a huge, just like waking up and realizing that shit happens, and, but yeah, I don't think I would have became vulnerable till probably like sophomore year, and especially this past year I took a self-leadership class, and we talked a lot about vulnerability, and everyone shared their stories, and that's when I realized so many people have so much in common if we would just talk to each other. And I think that all just came with, honestly, that class, learning about vulnerability and just my maturity and age. So
yeah, and it's just mind-blowing to me that I guess, a lot of people try and stay ignorant to stuff that they shouldn't, whether that be how they feel, how they treat others, or what they're doing negatively that they could change pretty easily. But yeah, I agree, and everything that we've been talking about it sucks, but it's much easier said than done. Or being vulnerable is like, yeah, I could go talk to someone, I'll go talk to someone, but doing it's a different story.
It's scary.
Oh, it's definitely scary. I think scary is I think a lot of growing up is scary.
Yeah.
Definitely moving from place to place or changing jobs. Just so I'm just trying to get through my 20s, right? But is there anything else that you kind of wanted to hit on? Any final thoughts for the listeners?
So my favorite quote is, "Be the person you needed to be when you were younger."
Oh, that hits home.
I just hope that helps people, and I hope my story helps whoever needs to hear it.
I definitely think it will, and I truly, truly thank you for coming on, sharing your story, being vulnerable, and I hope that others, recognize that, and I definitely think they will. So we'll wrap it up there. As far as Coffee with Demons stuff goes, working on more content for you guys, working on getting those meetings rolling. And so hopefully people can come out and share their own stories that maybe might not have the chance to hop on the podcast. So once again, thank you, Kaitlynn, and I will catch you guys next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Coffee with Demons podcast. Don't forget to check out our website at www.coffeewithdemons.com for more information on the Coffee with Demons movement.